At 2 a.m., everything he owned was ash. The warehouse that held his business, his inventory, his equipment, and years of sacrifice was engulfed in flames. The fire spread faster than anyone expected, and by the time he arrived, there was nothing he could do except watch. Orange flames tore through the roof while thick smoke swallowed the night sky. Firefighters fought desperately to contain the blaze, but some battles are lost before they begin. Standing behind the barricades, he felt as though he was watching years of his life disappear in front of his eyes. Every shelf, every machine, every product represented a piece of a dream he had spent years building. Within a few hours, that dream had been reduced to ashes. As dawn approached, exhaustion replaced shock. The noise of sirens faded, the crowds disappeared, and the reality of the situation settled heavily on his shoulders. He sat alone in his car staring at the horizon, trying to understand how everything had changed in a single night. Questions raced through his mind. How would he pay his bills? What would happen to his employees? How would he explain this to customers who were waiting for orders? The future that had seemed clear only a few hours earlier now looked uncertain and frightening. Yet as the first rays of sunlight appeared, another thought emerged, one that would change the course of his life forever. Instead of asking how much he had lost, he began asking what he could build next. Before the fire, his business had survived, but it had stopped growing. Like many entrepreneurs, he spent most of his time handling daily problems rather than creating long-term opportunities. The company generated enough income to stay afloat, but it was trapped in routines that left little room for innovation. There were ideas he wanted to pursue, systems he wanted to improve, and expansions he wanted to attempt, but there was never enough time. The demands of running the business consumed every hour of every day. Looking back, he realized he had become comfortable maintaining what already existed instead of pursuing what was possible. The destruction forced him to confront a difficult truth. If he rebuilt exactly what he had lost, he would simply return to the same limitations that had been holding him back for years. That realization inspired a decision that surprised everyone around him. Instead of rebuilding the old business, he would create a better one. Friends thought he was being unrealistic. Family members worried that grief was clouding his judgment. Financial advisors suggested playing it safe. After all, most people who lose everything focus on recovery, not expansion. Yet he understood something important. Sometimes the greatest opportunity arrives disguised as a disaster. The months that followed tested him in ways he had never experienced before. Insurance covered only part of the loss, leaving him with financial challenges that seemed impossible to overcome. Banks hesitated to approve funding. Potential investors questioned whether his vision was realistic. Suppliers wondered whether he could survive long enough to become a reliable customer again. Every meeting felt like an uphill battle. Rejection became a regular part of his life. There were days when discouragement followed him home and kept him awake late into the night. The temptation to quit appeared more than once, offering an easier path away from stress and uncertainty. Despite those struggles, he continued moving forward. Instead of dwelling on what had been destroyed, he immersed himself in learning. He studied successful businesses in his industry and analyzed what separated average companies from exceptional ones. He researched technology, automation, customer service, and operational efficiency. He examined every weakness that had existed in his previous business and searched for ways to eliminate it. What began as a recovery effort gradually transformed into a complete reinvention. The fire had destroyed his physical assets, but it had also removed the habits and limitations that had prevented him from thinking bigger. As time passed, small victories began to appear. A lender finally approved financing. Loyal customers remained supportive and promised to continue doing business with him. Former employees offered assistance, believing in the vision he was creating. Community members rallied around him and shared his story. Progress was slow, but it was real. Each step forward strengthened his confidence and reinforced his belief that setbacks do not determine outcomes. Decisions determine outcomes. The more he focused on building the future instead of mourning the past, the more opportunities seemed to emerge. Construction of the new facility eventually began, and every detail reflected lessons learned from previous mistakes. The layout was more efficient. The equipment was more advanced. The systems were designed to scale and grow. Processes that once required hours could now be completed in minutes. Technology replaced outdated methods, allowing the company to serve customers faster and more effectively. The new operation was not simply a replacement for what had been lost. It was a completely different business built on experience, strategy, and a clearer understanding of what success required. The journey was far from smooth. Unexpected expenses appeared regularly. Deadlines were missed. Problems emerged that no amount of planning could prevent. There were moments when he questioned whether the effort was worth the sacrifice. Yet every challenge reminded him of the night he had watched his business burn. Compared to that experience, most obstacles felt manageable. He had already survived what seemed impossible. That knowledge gave him strength during moments when others might have given up. 1 year after the fire, the new facility officially opened. Customers who visited were amazed by the transformation. The business was larger, more modern, and significantly more capable than the one that had been destroyed. Orders increased rapidly as existing customers returned and new customers discovered the company. Revenue climbed steadily, eventually surpassing levels he had once considered impossible. The growth was not the result of luck. It was the result of learning, adapting, and refusing to let a tragedy become a permanent defeat. As the years passed, the company continued expanding. Additional locations opened, new partnerships formed. Revenue multiplied. Opportunities that once seemed unreachable became reality. The business eventually became worth more than 10 times its value before the fire. To outsiders, the success looked remarkable. Many assumed he must have received extraordinary help or enjoyed perfect timing. Few understood the countless sacrifices, sleepless nights, difficult decisions, and moments of uncertainty hidden behind the visible achievements. The most valuable lesson he learned had little to do with business. Before the fire, he believed his success was connected to what he owned. The warehouse, equipment, inventory, and financial resources seemed like the foundation of everything he had accomplished. When those things disappeared, he discovered that the true source of success had never been the possessions themselves. It was his ability to learn, adapt, solve problems, and create value. The fire took away his assets, but it could not take away his experience, determination, or willingness to keep moving forward. That realization transformed the way he viewed setbacks. Instead of seeing obstacles as proof that success was impossible, he began seeing them as challenges that could be overcome. Confidence no longer came from circumstances. It came from knowing he could survive difficult circumstances. The experience taught him that resilience is not the absence of hardship. Resilience is the ability to continue despite hardship. It is the decision to keep building when others expect you to quit. Everyone experiences fires in life. Some arrive as financial losses, failed businesses, broken relationships, unexpected illnesses, or personal disappointments. They appear without warning and leave destruction behind. In those moments, it is easy to believe the story is over. It is easy to focus on everything that has been lost. Yet history is filled with people who discovered that endings often create space for new beginnings. The question is not whether difficulties will occur. The question is how we respond when they do. The man who lost everything in a fire never recovered the exact warehouse that burned down. He never got back the years of work that vanished overnight. He never erased the pain of that night or forgot the sight of flames consuming everything he had built. What he gained instead was something even more valuable. He gained the opportunity to rebuild with greater wisdom, stronger systems, and a larger vision. The tragedy that appeared to end his journey became the event that transformed it. Years later, people admired the success he achieved and the empire he created. They saw the thriving business, the growth, and the accomplishments. What they rarely saw was the lonely sunrise after the fire, when he sat exhausted and uncertain about the future. That moment mattered more than any grand opening or financial milestone. It was the moment he chose hope instead of surrender. It was the moment he decided that losing everything would not define the rest of his life. The ashes were real, the loss was devastating, and the obstacles were enormous. Yet none of those things proved stronger than the decision he made that morning. By choosing to move forward, by choosing to learn instead of quit, and by choosing to build instead of surrender, he transformed the worst night of his life into the foundation of his greatest success. What began as a story of destruction became a story of resilience, and what looked like the end became the beginning of something 10 times greater than he had ever imagined.